Peter Greenberg coming back up on the stage to have a super panel that will supercharge your discussions, your conversations, and how you're going to take all of this to the next level. So Peter, come on up and tell us about your group.
I will.
To round out our day.
Okay, I will, thanks. Are you ready to be supercharged? Don't lie to me. Following Kostas. Wasn't Kostas great? He grows the best blueberries in Maine, and I forced him every year to send me some. I'm still waiting, Kostas. So, the name of this panel is like, what's next? What's the future of wellness tourism? So please invite back to the stage Jean-Claude Baumgarten. Where are you, Jean-Claude? Amitabh Kant. Amitabh, where are you? Is Amitabh here? There he is. Mia Kyricos, where you are. Kurt Schroeder. Come on up, Kurt. And you saw him before, of course, Josef Woodman. Josef, where are you? Come on, please. You know, listening to what Kostas was just saying about generating energy, I have visions now of the brightest, most well-lit, delayed airports in the world. But forgetting that, I want to take a few words before we get to our panel. And in the interest of full disclosure, first of all, say, Kurt, my godson was born in your hospital. And when he was born, I went to visit the hospital and wanted to know why I couldn't check in. Because it's a hotel. I mean, it is putting the word hospitality back in hospital. And a lot to be proud of there. And we also talked, and you talked about it in your talk earlier today, and Susie talked about it, a lot of people talked about it today, about the intersection and the definitional problems between wellness tourism and medical tourism. We're doing a story next week on CBS This Morning, coincidentally. It'll be running, I think, on the 9th or 10th, about a hospital in Detroit, outside of Detroit, that Kurt might know about, called the Henry Ford Hospital. And it's a very interesting story because it really embodies the intersection, not the separation, but the intersection of wellness tourism and medical tourism. They're building this hospital in Detroit, and they're trying to figure out what can we do to make it different from a patient perspective, from a medical perspective, and from a wellness perspective. So who did they bring in to run it? The top guy from the Ritz-Carlton. Very interesting thing happened there. First of all, when you check into the hospital, they give you a private room. Not a semi-private room, a private room that is so large that it's got a day bed next to it, so if a significant other or family member wants to spend the night, they're encouraged to spend the night. Number two, what's your definition of hospital food? A plastic tray and a bowl of Jell-O. Maybe some apple juice. They opened a restaurant at this hospital that is so good and so cutting edge, they're doing 250 lunches and dinners a day from outside people in the community who are just making reservations to eat at the hospital. And if you're a patient there, you order your food off the same menu. How many people here have been in the hospital? It's okay. They also tried to take a look at the 24-hour clock of the patient experience. Why is it that somebody's coming into your room at 2 o'clock in the morning to draw blood? Because that was their shift. It had nothing to do with your well-being. So they now have a rule at this hospital. No patient can be awakened between 10 o'clock at night and 5:30 in the morning unless there's an emergency. It started to sound like a pretty good 4-star, 5-star resort. But here's the interesting intersection, and that's this. They're doing cutting-edge surgeries there, whether it's hip replacements or robotic prostate surgery, but the people come in for the medical procedures, but they come back for the yoga. They come back for the wellness. They've created a community. It's not just a hospital, which I think is really quite interesting. So when we go back to what we were talking about this morning with Jean-Claude and trying to figure out what's the definition of wellness tourism, well, how can we figure out where we go from here if we haven't totally defined what it is? So Kurt, can you give us a definition of wellness tourism?
First of all, I'm very happy to be on the super panel because I wouldn't want to be on one of those regular panels. So. But,
see, he's always looking for the upgrade.
That's right.
That's pretty good.
I like your thing. It's like come for the colonoscopy, stay for the food. So,
well, we're going to get to branding in a minute. We'll get to branding in a minute.
You know, actually, the whole idea of medical tourism was very controversial in the early days. Actually, we don't like the word tourism associated with it because we think it creates an image of medical light, because tourism is considered a light. And there's been whole seminars dedicated to trying to separate those two. But I think, as was pointed out at a study a couple years ago that was presented here, it has taken on a life of its own, and it is the vernacular now. And so medical tourism is here to stay. But we actually didn't like, from the medical standpoint, that we like to call it medical travel, anything but medical tourism.
And one of the reasons why you did, of course, is because the traditional medical associations, like the AMA, frowned on it. Mm-hmm. Initially, they wouldn't even acknowledge it. And isn't it ironic, and Joseph can speak better than this to anybody, that today if you go to your hospital, or we were just down in Panama at Johns Hopkins affiliated hospital there, or the Cleveland Clinic opening up everywhere else, all these doctors are board certified in the United States by the same associations that were frowning upon the whole concept of medical tourism not too long ago. So what's your definition of wellness tourism, Joseph?
It's actually a good question.
That's why I asked it.
We've been asking that question with SRI for the past 6 months. And I think they did a good job of summing it up with that chart of many bubbles, if you will, which had wellness tourism in the middle, is $469 billion business, and a lot of other intersecting circles, And at those points of convergence, I think, are really important. And I happen to think, and I can be crucified for this, but I think that wellness tourism itself as a pure activity is something that's going to take some massaging and some growth. The actual tourist to that purposeful wellness tourist, the primary wellness tourist that says, I am setting out on a journey to feel better or to improve myself, is in the minority. And SRI recognizes that because A, there's a lot of domestic tourism and wellness tourism, and B, there's a lot of the secondary tourism, the people that are incidental. We call it the incidental medical traveler.
Or the accidental medical traveler.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason why I asked that, put it in those terms, last year I was in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. In fact, you were with me, and we were there with one of my camera crew. And my producer, remember the story?
Right, yeah.
My producer doesn't feel well. And they said, well, let's check you out. They take her, and it turns out she has a huge infection in her throat, an abscess. They checked her into the hospital for 2 days, right? They operated, right? She's 26.
Dharmansara Hospital.
Exactly.
Beautiful
right?
new
Beautiful hospital. The nurse-to-patient ratio is 9-to-1. I wanted to check into this hospital.
How do they look like?
Like the one that you showed earlier, like the one that Kurt showed. But the bottom line is, it wasn't just the care, it was the aftercare, because when they released her and she was feeling great, she didn't get on a plane and fly home. They took her to a resort for 4 days. Mm-hmm. And so now, what is she doing? And this comes back to your point of wellness tourism. Where does she want to go now? She wants to go back and continue the process of figuring out who she is and what she can be in terms of maintaining her health.
Well, and one of our advisory board members, also in Malaysia, went to the Batu Caves and got bit by a monkey. So that might be the next item on her agenda. He ended up in a hospital also in Malaysia for rabies.
Thank you for sharing the frothing at the mouth story.
Monkey tourism.
Now, when we do comparative studies about wellness tourism in terms of where those major focal points are, those hubs, India comes right up there, right? I mean, you've branded Incredible India. Are you branding wellness tourism?
Peter, to my mind, wellness is about spiritual, holiday which will give you spiritual elevation, which
But if you look at the visuals of Incredible India, that's what you're selling already.
Yeah. But in a holistic manner, wellness tourism is all about spiritual elevation, mental rejuvenation, and to my mind, intellectual invigoration as well. Because, ultimately, the solution to all human problems are spiritual in nature. And that connect between mind and body is all about wellness tourism.
Are you sure of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, to my mind, much of the future of wellness tourism and what next is about what India's past is all about.
Elaborate.
Because the concept of wellness in the European and the Western concept is about the curative aspects of water. It's about the facial rejuvenation. In the Indian context, it's about a cosmic connect between mind and body. And it's about the spiritual harmony that comes in. And I think that is the key. And unless and until we understand that wellness is about soul nourishment and spiritual harmony, that is the key. And that is why the future of wellness is all related to what is India's past and India's tradition.
So it's totally consistent with your branding of the whole country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why I'm saying that much of India's past needs to be rediscovered by the Western world. And that's increasingly critical.
But you got to get them here first.
Yeah, but the world of travel and tourism is radically changing. If you look at the emerging markets, only 50% of the emerging market has actually traveled abroad. The world of travel and tourism was designed for the European and the American travelers, and that is going to go through a revolutionary change. So the 50% of the global population, only 5% have traveled abroad, and they're going to travel in large numbers. It's not the Swiss institutes of Lucerne, which were designed for European travelers, which are going to determine the future of travel and tourism. It'll be determined by the Chinese and the Indians, because they are going to travel in large numbers in the future. And the European world, the Ritz-Carlton of the world, the Four Seasons of the world will have to redesign themselves for this traveler.
And what's interesting about that from a North American perspective is, from my parents' generation, this is a scary statistic, 82% of my parents' generation would die in America within 20 miles of where they were born. Today, it's down to 62%. That's still a huge number. So in the United States, nobody has to go anywhere. They just sit there and die, you see?
That's simply because Americans are geographically illiterate.
Ignorant. Ignorant. Americans are the most ignorant travelers in the world. Here, let me give you an example. Where'd you go on your vacation? Aruba, where's that? I don't know, we flew.
Or worse, Las Vegas.
And you're laughing because you know who these people are. What was that?
I said worse, Las Vegas. We saw the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
Oh no, true story. I'm actually on the Strip in Las Vegas at the Venetian. If we ever wanted to be mean-spirited, we'd lock a camera down on the Strip in Las Vegas, and about every 5 people who walk by, we'd just stop and say, "Excuse me, but what were you thinking?" But anyway. And there was a guy, slightly overweight, with his girlfriend in the hot pants, and he had his arm around her on the faux bridge of sighs, right? The faux bridge of sighs. And he said, honey, I've been to Venice. This is better. Moving right along, speaking of branding, how perfect a segue to Mia.
Hello.
Yes, you're the Chief Branding Officer for Spa Wellness.
Spafinder Wellness.
Spafinder Wellness. It's one thing to hear what Amitabh said about branding a country this way, right? But isn't there also a mistake about over-branding?
I think it can be. It's developing emotional connections to brands. I think that's ultimately why people take part in branding. And I would say I have a strong emotional connection now to India, which I think very much taught us how to breathe. But I think that there is a risk of over-branding. And I think that where we lose sight of is we're looking at the focus group research, which you championed this morning about. I know you're a big focus group guy. Yeah. I think a lot of times we get hung up on what we're looking at the research. We ignore the gut instincts, which you've brought up. And I think that we get into a case of over-branding. And that's really an absence of emotional connection. And I think when you can identify what those intrinsic motivators are in developing brands, they can succeed.
But then that brings up the other question, which Kostas was almost alluding to in terms of cultural heritage, and that is, at what point in the evolution of wellness tourism, in what point of your expansion, which in some cases is exponential, are you imposing a different culture on the culture?
It's a great question.
That's why I asked it.
Great question. Well, and I don't think I have a good answer for it. I think that I think when you talked about your parents' generation, I think of my dad, and I used to watch him pack up for a business trip. I would never see him put his sneakers in a suitcase. And now it's the first thing I grab. So I do think that there's a significant evolution that's taking place on the consumer side where the lifestyle has changed. You know, it's occurring us to try to maintain our health while we're traveling. Or, you know, in rare cases, I say rare cases enhance it, which I think Ophelia called it the primary traveler, where they're going to India for a week-long visit to an ashram. But I think we really have a great opportunity with the secondary travelers, those that find that they want to maintain their healthy lifestyle. They're already going to the gym. They're trying to get good sleep. They're trying to eat superfoods and all of these things that I think is more common in today's world of travel than it was 10, 20 years ago.
And one of the reasons for that is that they don't really change their lifestyle when they change their location.
That's true. That's exactly
even though they
true.
think they want to.
Exactly.
Right? But Jean-Claude, let's talk about one of the things that was brought up before that Terry brought up, and that is access and immigration and visa situations, right? How do you, I think it's quite ironic that we talk about the BRIC countries. We're obsessed with the BRIC countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, these are the exploding economies, right? And isn't it interesting that those are the 4 countries that come immediately to mind about difficulty in getting a visa or delay in getting a visa? Yeah, I'm looking right at you. Yeah. I'm looking right at you, okay? Because most of my friends, if they were watching this on a closed circuit feed right now in Indiana and wanted to come to India tomorrow, couldn't, because it would take too long to get the visa.
Yeah, but they've introduced visa on arrival for about 29 countries now.
Yes, and is the United States one of them?
You know, actually...
is the United States one of them?
You know... what, you know, it's... actually, United States is in the waiting list. It's coming. Well, it's going to come, but you know, the visa regime, I was in the tourism ministry about 6 years back. And let me tell you honestly that the visa regime has been eased up a lot, enormously. But you know, when we talk about the visa regime, you have to look at many other dimensions, and one of which is the security dimensions. And in the Indian context, India has had a very, very troubled security regime here. So, you know, we look at, because we from the tourism industry, we have that travel tourism perspective. But when you talk to the intelligence agencies, when you talk to the Home Ministry, it's a totally different perspective. And I think that balance is getting struck right now. And I think opening up has started happening. And probably in the next 3 to 4 years, India will be one of the easiest countries to travel to.
I hope so, because...
It's a process of evolution.
Really? Yeah. And how long does evolution take? Okay. Okay.
Well, much faster than America did.
No, wait. Wait a minute.
You took one hell of a long time to evolve.
Yeah, but once we did it, we did it. The waiting time for a visa 2.5 years ago, and Jean-Claude can talk about this, for an Indian to come to America, for a Chinese to come to America, for a Russian, for a Brazilian, was 160 days to get a visa approved. And this was the last 10 years that we've all talked about of inbound travel to the United States after 9/11, right? Under Secretary Clinton, they really beat up all the consular officers and said, hey, let's start running this like a business without sacrificing security. And that waiting time right now is 2.5 days, right? So that's our evolution. Okay. But I hope that you can speed it up, because you can't build it and they can't come if they can't get the visa. But let's talk about immigration issues here, because that is the key. It's always the argument, isn't it, of balancing security interests with trying to get people to come.
It's funny because Peter keeps asking me questions and then Amitabh answers.
Well, let me respond to this one.
Let the driver answer.
Oh, the immigration in India is brilliant. Much better than you faced at John F. Yeah. Well, much better. It's brilliant.
You know, I had that discussion when we started the India initiative, WTTC, and there was a very elegant Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we were discussing that. That was quite some time ago, Amitabh. You were in Kerala still. Yeah. And he said, why should I ease the visa to countries who don't make it easy for my country citizens?
It's reciprocity.
And yeah, that's reciprocity. And my answer was, do you want tourists or you don't want tourists?
Right, and?
So, is it on your side, and it will come to the other side. So in other words, you should not be stubborn in things like that. And by the way, with all due respect to your progress, it took me quite some time to get my visa to come to India.
Never mind them.
I was even thinking about cheating. Me, can you imagine? Cheating and asking for a tourist visa. And at the end, I got a convention visa. I asked for a couple of entries. I got one. And only 2 months. So if within those 2 months I would not come.
It's called evolution.
Okay, good.
But we're working on it, right?
So now, immigration.
Yes.
You know, the traffic is growing. I have been saying that forever today. The airports are not growing, except that they are multiplying like breads or rice in China. However, what is not growing, what is not easing, is the immigration facilities. We have all the technical means to make it easy, and nothing is happening. I remember we started with the American. I will give help to American also a little bit now. With the INSPAS, you remember that?
I do.
And WTTC was pushing that. You know, you put your hand in, and then you went through.
Didn't work.
It didn't work. Why? Because the union of the immigration officers were against it. And they screwed up, excuse me, ladies, the whole project. What we should push our governments is it's easy to go through immigration and to go through security.
We have the technology.
The United States has 65,000 employees at the TSA. 65,000.
Which stands for thousands standing around. And if you don't like that one, it's taking scissors away. Pick the one you like.
So we have here an uphill battle, which we haven't won yet.
Although the technology that does apply, which is out of Ireland, it's out of Bermuda, it's out of the Bahamas, it's out of Canada and Ireland, it's Preclearance. And what a brilliant idea that is, that saves everybody time in every aspect of the travel process. The airlines aren't burning more fuel, passengers aren't delayed, their baggage isn't misconnected, they're not misconnected. Ease of entry, because it still takes, you have to still be at the airport 2 hours before your flight, and they process your immigration there for the United States, just like they could for those people coming to India. And a very interesting thing just happened in Abu Dhabi, where the airline there, Etihad, went to the United States and made a deal to do pre-clearance there for US citizens leaving Abu Dhabi and the Emirates coming back to the United States. And every US airline fought them, saying they were being put at a competitive disadvantage. Wrong. The Etihad guys were smart. They said, we're willing to pay for it because it's not what it costs, it's what it's worth. And they were able to run the numbers to realize less inconvenience, ease of access, and less fuel burn, less misdelayed. What a great marketing scheme. It's not new, right? So the point is we have the technology to be able to, first of all, you can't experience India until you can get here, right? I mean, I figured that one out. So.
No, I totally agree that one of the key things is to use technology to leapfrog in the world of travel and tourism. That's increasingly happening. And I think actually there have been radical improvement on the immigration regime in India. And I don't think, part of the problem has been the airport infrastructure. And as airports improve in India, I mean, you've had a pretty good airport in Delhi now. So I don't see immigration problems in Delhi at all. The new Mumbai airport is going to open up in 2 months' time. And that's a remarkable airport. And I don't visualize a problem in Mumbai as well. But I think the key point is that the government of India has taken a policy decision that except from places where we've had security threats. All other places we'll introduce visa on arrival at all major airports.
That's great.
And Peter, this could be a differentiating factor. So I just came from Sri Lanka. I went online, and it took me about 4 minutes to fill out an online ETA and print out the
It's
visa
like Australia.
on my printer.
It's like
Same
Australia.
thing with I did Cambodia, which is one
Yeah.
of the most, one of the most bottom third world countries. I can get a visa in less than 30 minutes sitting in my office. But it also became a differentiating factor in medical tourism. We were sort of competing for business from Bangladesh with Malaysia. Our biggest problem is that Malaysia put out an official government sponsor concept. If you're coming for medical care and you had an invitation, you could get a visa within 24 hours. Thailand still required copies of bank books, copies of passports, letter of recommendations, letter from employers, mommy says you can letters, and and it took about a week. And we went to the ministry and said, this is a differentiating factor. Do you want to be in this business or not? If you are sick and you need care now, this isn't planning, to go surfing in Malaysia. This is people coming for medical care. They will move their business from one country to the other for a 7-day visa span. It's going to be important for India. People will not come from the Middle East to bring their people. They come because they have visa on arrival in the Middle East. We were told by the Middle East that they prefer Thailand, and one of the key reasons was we can get visa on arrival. It was an important decision for medical tourists, maybe not as much for spa tourists, but medical. And by the way, to make it clear, we have Jello that's in Thailand that's lemongrass flavored in plastic bowls. So just we differentiate our product.
What a unique selling proposition that
right.
is. Wow. In the last couple of minutes we have left, I'm going to go around the panel. We're talking about where the future is in wellness tourism. So, where is the future? Don't try to define it. We did that at the beginning. What do you think will be the next big thing?
I think it's, I want to use the word evolution, I'll be in trouble, but the concept though, I'm going to speak about medical travel more than the wellness travel, as I think the idea that it's a topic for a conversation at a conference, in 10 years it won't be. The idea of people seeking healthcare across borders, it sounds interesting, it was surprising. Americans find it fascinating, but in Europe they cross borders for lunch. In America they cross border when they go out once in a lifetime to go on an overseas trip. So it's a different environment. But I think in 10 years, the idea, it won't even be newsworthy. It won't be panel worthy. It'll be, well, of course, I went there because that's where I got the best value for healthcare. And the idea of crossing borders maybe won't be such a big deal.
Well, the title of your book, right, Joseph? What's it called?
Patients Beyond Borders.
Yeah, no borders.
We need to do beauty beyond borders, but that's another story.
Okay, fine.
Amitabh? We've got great spas in resorts and hotels, but I think the unique opportunity is to create a great experiential brand. Experiential brand which is very authentic in nature and which cuts across geographical boundaries. Very, very authentic, very high value, very meant for the alert independent traveler, and absolutely authentic in nature and cuts across geographical boundaries. That one single brand across geographical boundaries has not yet been established, and that's a huge business opportunity. I think I want to make one more point, and that's very critical for the wellness industry, and that is a huge and immense shortage of well-trained skills. And if you were to look at the Ayurveda industry in India, you need about 72% skilled manpower and just about 28% doctors. What we are doing is just the reverse. We are producing actually 78% doctors and only 22% skilled manpower. So the whole equation between skilled manpower and Ayurvedic doctors has gone wrong. And you need to get that skill factor right.
So you got to change the pipeline.
Absolutely.
The one thing we haven't talked about, and I'll just throw it out here, is the power of social media to go across those borders now. Because if somebody comes over here and has that experience, Amitabh, they're tweeting it, they're on Facebook, right? That is huge, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, social media is very powerful. It's incredibly powerful because it's very experiential. It's instantaneous, it's experiential, and I think the power of the social media must be used very, very strongly. And I think that the wellness industry hasn't still used it. It's not, because essentially it's about experience. And experience is individual in character. And the individual is going to explain about his experience. And he's going to tweet about it. And therefore, it's about that individual who comes and experiences your spa. It's that individual who experiences wellness. And that is why the ultimate experience and that spiritual elevation of that individual is the key to a success of a wellness.
If they're tweeting.
You won't survive, you'll go bust otherwise.
You know, I think one of the things that's on the horizon is with the cost of healthcare and all the talk about company and corporate wellness and workplace wellness programs and trying to come up with the right incentives and rewards and everything for employees to stay well. I can't think of a better incentive than someone going on a 7-day wellness-related vacation and actually using the time that no one takes off anymore. And I think that would be solving two problems.
That also may change all of corporate health policies, right? To a point where they'll actually encourage it.
Absolutely.
Jean-Claude?
Well, when I came into that problematic about wellness, by the way, I had some sleepless nights, Susie, because I didn't know what to put below the umbrella of wellness, well-being. And at the end, I said to myself, all what makes you feel good should be under that umbrella.
Like wine?
Like wine.
Right.
With care, of course.
Yes, okay.
Like spending less money for governments. Like going somewhere and having a new experience. So in other words, I think in order to progress, you have the figures now, and congratulations, that study is fantastic. Now you have to put a definition in it, but not a closed one, an open one, and put below wellness or well-being the feel-good, the experience part of it. And I think if I would make an advice here, put a team together, brainstorm about what you want to put into that package, so that when you explain that, it's clear and it has borders. The medical tourism, medical travel is a perfect example about the ambiguity of the whole thing. And I think the task, and I would love to participate to that, by the way, the task is now to define very clearly a path, what's below the umbrella, and leave it open a little bit because things are changing.
One last thing I want to talk. Oh, sorry, Joseph. Yeah.
One of the things we found many years ago in the research we did for Patients Beyond Borders, we originally thought, oh, we'll pick 80 countries. And you realize you had to really work hard to pare it down and build the spec. And one of the things that was stating the obvious, it might be, but it wasn't obvious to us at the time, was that in order for wellness tourism to be successful, in order for a country to attract the wellness tourist, they've got to have a wellness infrastructure and a wellness ecosystem. And a lot of countries don't realize that. And I like what Anne-Marie was saying about building packages around wellness and building a wellness inventory. We don't really have that in medical tourism. There's no broker, there's no third party that can sell a medical tourism package. But here's an opportunity, but the first thing to do is to identify those countries that really can play ball and identify the stakeholders, the ministers of health, the public and private stakeholders, the hospitality and tourism people, and cultivate those few that are going to be the leaders. And that's probably fewer than we might imagine.
You know, circling back around to what Kostas was talking about when he was up here about sustainability, he said all the arrows are pointing this way. 22% said it was a deciding factor in where they chose to go. 63%, whatever the numbers were. And I don't think you can argue that the arrows are pointing that way. But the challenge, I think, for the wellness community and for the wellness tourism community is, okay, that's the deciding factor of why they chose to go, but what are they actually going to do about it when they get there, right? How do you help them connect the dots so that they can follow the money and make sure it goes back to local communities, and that they can immerse themselves in a culture in a non-destructive way?
You know, whatever you call it, whether you call it sustainable, you call it responsible, you call it ecotourism, you know, what you're witnessing globally is slowly the decline of the mass tourism. And the world is moving to a period of experiential tourism. And I think there is a complete new world of the discerning traveler. And that's very critical. If, that authentic, real experience, you have to cater to that discerning traveler. And my experience of Kerala was that Kerala was just a 3-month destination. We moved from a mass destination to a high-value, upmarket clientele destination. It became a 1-year-long destination on the back of just 2 products. Ayurveda, where people started coming in for 18 to 21 days. The average stay used to be 3 days. They came in for 21 days to 18 to 20, and the second was back.
What destination can claim an average stay of 21 days?
India.
Wait,
The longest number of days.
You know why? They come for 3 days and wait for 18 days for the visa. I figured it out. Okay.
Peter, I actually think one thing that we should all take note of when we think about wellness tourism is I think our industry's done a really good job of describing how it feels and what it looks like, but not what it does. And I think the benefits are something we need to elevate. We have tools. I mean, spaevidence.com is a good example of one that this great organization I think developed. But beyond that, we need to talk about the benefits, and we need to do it in a way that is easily consumable, that is in plain, simple language, because we're still talking about something that sounds very academic, and we need to make it approachable.
I agree with you. It's interesting. You mentioned Amitabh. It's the experience travel. Let's go one step beyond that. It's really, we're living in a world of experiential one-upsmanship. People want those bragging rights. They want to be able to say, oh, you went here? No, I went here and did that, right? So the word upgrade has an application beyond what we've really talked about when it comes to wellness tourism.
Yeah, but there's another segment which hasn't been tapped as yet, and that is a very vast domestic market segment. I mean, we all cater to international travelers, and to my mind, if you look at the market, it's a growing and expanding market of the upper middle class. I mean, if 750 million Indians are going to get into the urbanization process, I mean, there's a huge, vast domestic market which you need to cater to, and that wellness market still hasn't been tapped as yet. So it's very important. I mean, you have 15 million Indians traveling abroad, but you have a huge domestic market. I mean, it's much bigger than the international markets of many. So that domestic market is a big market to be tapped.
Well, the quantum change is not on the horizon. It is the horizon.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, that's the reality. Are we okay on time? We are okay on time. Last question then. If you could change something about wellness tourism, what would you change? About either the approach or the application? Anybody want to jump in here? I'm shocked.
Well, there are too many iffy spas which are based around just a massage. A wellness is not about a massage. It's about a regimen. It's about a way of life. It's about mind, body, and soul. And therefore, to my mind, I'm not a great believer in regulation, but I'm a great believer in certification. And I'm a believer in the industry indulging in self-certification. And there is a need to do that certification. India,
and that certification leads to a comfort level.
It's a very, very critical. If you want to maintain wellness to very high level standards, you need to build, the industry must get into self-certification.
Jean-Claude?
Yeah, well.
You got some applause. You got some applause.
First, the consumer will decide. Second, the consumer will not only brag with his neighbors, but he will brag all over the social networks. Third, I think we have to be very open to everything. And again, that's why I talked about feel good. And under wellness, you have to have that feel good concept, so that when you come back, you can talk about that and feel content. So, in other words, what is lacking for the time being, in my humble point of view, is that we haven't expressed enough that feel-good factor in wellness. And once we have achieved that, then we get a very favorable attitude from the consumer. And that's why a little bit medical tourism is something disturbing, you know, because you have to go somewhere to get a new hip, you know, or you have to go somewhere to get a new shoulder, which is something rather painful or rather uncomfortable. But if we go and express that it makes not that part of the business, I'm not convinced that medical treatment should be part of wellness tourism, frankly speaking. But the other part, where the feel-good part, has to be explored.
Well, first of all, another 21-day also is coincidentally the average length of stay for an acute psychiatric facility. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with Kerala, but
wow.
But
talk about feel good.
That's right.
Heavily medicated.
There's nothing like electrical shock therapy to go to the spa. But
every 3 hours, you know.
But I would say that the change is assured in the medical tourism side, mainly for the reason I do a speech called the 10 myths of medical tourism. The number one is, the myth is that people want to leave their country to get health care in another country. They don't want to go. Not one of them wants to go. They go because they have to. They go because they can't afford it. They go because they can't get access to it, or they're not comfortable with the quality. If everybody had a choice, they would always stay home for medical care. So over time, it's assuredly going to change. Countries will go through cycles. Bangladesh used to be everybody left. 50,000 people a year left Bangladesh solely for medical care. That has been partially reversed, and it will continue. And you'll see that cycle in Thailand. 20 years ago, everybody used to leave Thailand and go to Singapore. You look back 60 years ago, everybody from Singapore used to go to Burma for health care. You can see how things have changed now. But they may cycle back again. So change is an assured element.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think we have an opportunity to flip-flop the conversation. I think this is somewhat hinting to what Jean-Claude just said about feeling good. I think from a business standpoint, we've articulated what the opportunities are. You know, we talk about prevention. We talk about the fact that 90% of all doctor's visits in the US, for instance, are for lifestyle conditions that we can prevent. But what if we talked about how good it feels? What if we talked about that, you know, you can improve the quality of your life and spend more time with people you love by taking the trip to a great destination, and oh, by the way, it's good for you. You know, I think that we need to change the way we market this in a manner that doesn't scare consumers and entices them to go.
Well, you mentioned the word too academic, right? And there's that the trade-off between have to and want to. And we forgot one, need to.
Right.
Right? Joseph?
Well, first of all, I want to underscore how important raising the benchmarks for certification and regulation. And I know these are words that a lot of folks in the wellness community don't want to hear. But you are a part of a community that carries risk. And just like hotels and restaurants need to be certified, I don't think we need to be afraid of that. People don't walk into restaurants and say, oh my God, all this horrible red tape I have to go through because it's so regulated. You know, there's a lot of regulation going on in restaurants to keep people well. And there's a lot of regulation that goes on in a lot of other communities. So that's, to me, one of the real keys. It will begin to create a dialogue. The second thing is, it might be controversial, I'm trying to get my arms around it, but you go to a spa, you go to, unless you're a really hardcore wellness enthusiast, people are talking about the travel experience. And you come back and you go, I had a massage, I had an Ayurvedic trip, what else did you do? Oh, I feel good. So I do think there need to be considerations around add-ons, which are natural adjuncts, side trips, adventure tourism, ecotourism. I go back to that chart of many bubbles where wellness tourism is interconnected with a lot of these other types of tourism. And I think the way that it's going to succeed and the way that that evolution is going to be telescoped and accelerated is to consider other kinds of packages that are adjuncts to wellness tourism, because that purist, I think, is few and far between.
So what you're saying is they're going to discover wellness tourism almost as an, well, almost accidentally, if you will, to having another experience.
I think you could go primarily for that, but you need to be considering other kinds of things. Like when I was at Vana, that was a very pure experience. If I'd have been there for a week, for me, I would have been climbing the walls. I would have wanted to go somewhere and gone outside and seen that beautiful, incredible countryside. We took a wrong turn on the way back home, and
Turned out to be a right turn?
down the mountain on the way to Dehradun, and this waterfall that would have been a tourist attraction in almost any other country, must have been 300 feet high, was just before us. And that was to me a huge takeaway. So I do think there's that combination and mixing it up a little bit.
So it's either that or the psychiatric stay, I understand.
Or let's get a bad driver.
Listen, we are out of time. Would you please thank our panel, Kurt, Josef, Amitabh, Mia, and Jean-Claude. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.